Dave, what's available as we're approaching Christmas, sort of plants and vegetable-wise?
Well, this may sound like a shaggy dog or an old wives' tale at the moment, but as I was just explaining to you before you finished the record there, this year's been a very strange one, certainly where fruit's concerned anyway. Only last week my wife and I were on the allotment, and we were picking strawberries and raspberries, would you believe?
No.
Which was actually confirmed by the allotment next door, the chap who's got that particular one, taking strawberries or taking raspberries off his own plants as well. Raspberries in November is
never
quite...
believe it this time
You would
of year.
never believe it. The only thing that was missing was a pot of cream to go with them to eat them. By the way, I never got a raspberry. My wife and my neighbour actually ate most of them themselves. I was doing the driving. But more seriously, it's a time of year when we're looking to brighten the homes up in preparation for Christmas. You did actually mention that. So there are many plants which are available commercially. Many flowers, either as bulbs or fully grown, which will brighten up the winter months. Lots of people will have seen, for instance, and they're very good value at this particular moment, the orchids, which are available in commercially or in the shops. I know there are different price levels elsewhere, lots of places, but orchids will brighten up any windowsill. Winter pansies is another one, for instance. Hippeastrums, or the amaryllis lily, you know, this very large, very tall plant with this huge trumpet. Again, time to grow them, and to grow them for maybe not just Christmas, but for the New Year and the winter months as well. So they're available. Hyacinth, cyclamen, lots of cyclamen. Those last two, the hyacinth and the cyclamen, they've got an added bonus in that when they finish flowering indoors, and they've dried off, dig them up or take them out of the pot and replant them in the garden, so you get the added bonus of them coming up next year as well. They'll look great if you plant them in the spring. So next year, free plants. I'm always going on about as much freedom or much freebie as you can get, but they'll all look great and superb on a warm windowsill. Just one word of warning on these kinds of plants: don't draw the curtains on them overnight. Certainly not the amaryllis lily and the orchids, as the temperature difference between the window and the curtain could be quite drastic. So you could still lose the plant, even though it's actually indoors.
That's something I wouldn't have thought of, actually.
No, it's well worth actually for overnight just moving them back from the window. Certainly if it's just a single skin window. Double glazing, not quite so bad, but there is a huge temperature difference. If you're drawing, quite naturally we all do this, heavy curtains across, suddenly the plant thinks, what the heck is going on here? You know, I'll go into a dormant state, or I think I'll die, or something like that. So there's a lot which is actually out there, which you can buy, which you should have prepared, i.e. growing bulbs, those kinds of plants, which are now readily available, and should be available for the Christmas period as well. Right. Well, on the vegetable side, there's many that will successfully overwinter in the ground. Things like carrots, for instance, will successfully overwinter in the ground. Certainly parsnips, and lots of other root vegetables will allow you to eat them, let's say, as long as you can dig them up if the ground's not too hard, quite obviously. They might only need to be dug when they're needed for the table. I still have carrots on my plot, for instance. I still have parsnips in my plot, and I'll only dig them as and when I actually need them. They're safer in the ground, quite frankly. And depending on the hardness of the ground, parsnips are supposed to taste better as well, by the way, if they've had a touch of frost to them, so they get sweeter, apparently. And then, of course, there are Brussels sprouts. Again, another very hardy vegetable. We're all eating them for Christmas and throughout the winter. And, of course, the stalks are appearing in the shops now. But if you've been growing Brussels, then fine. Again, frost is not actually going to affect them very much. So they won't be affected by a cold weather spell. Again, another vegetable which is very easily grown, actually, and I would recommend to anybody who has a small amount of space or available space, is to grow some leeks. Because leeks, although they stay in the ground for a long time, they're a very, very useful vegetable when you run out of onions, for instance, that kind of thing. But they are very, very hardy indeed. Perfectly hardy. They can be left in the ground throughout the winter months. Again, they'll be ready to harvest in the spring when there isn't much else available at that particular time, because you're bringing all your other flowers and vegetables and other plant produce on. If you've been growing and storing any fruit, such as apples or pears, it's now the time to check and remove any that may well have rotted or gone off.
Right.
It's very good because they should all be individually wrapped in the trays anyway, because that will cut down on the amount of rot which spreads. You know, this story of one rotten apple in a barrel, which will affect the entire barrel if you're not careful. Again, although they've got tough, hard skins, if you've grown squashes throughout the summer, again, it's best to check them for signs of softening or rot. Not so much along the skins, but usually at the ends where the stalk has been cut from the stalk. That usually is one of the first parts to grow. So it's well worth checking on those kind of things. If you've grown potatoes, check those as well. If you're storing potatoes, there's nothing worse than actually coming across, how can we say, a sack of rotting potatoes. Not only does it smell, it's extremely difficult to get rid of. So, and one last point about this, if we go back to when we were talking about flowers here, the Christmas poinsettia. I've had this happen to me before I knew about them. They're absolutely beautiful. They're brilliant. I will buy some for the Christmas table as well. But if you're buying a poinsettia as a Christmas decoration, make sure that when you leave the shop, your plant is extremely well protected. That little distance between shop and car can make all the difference for actually getting your poinsettia home and it being a successful plant. They are warm climate plants. They come originally from Mexico, warm climate plants, and they won't tolerate any drop in temperature. So you need to be very careful. I'm not suggesting people wrap them up in blankets, but make sure that they are protected when you actually leave a shop with a poinsettia. Rather, you could end up then with a very, very dramatic and very quick leaf fall, and you have a bare plant when it was a beautiful, beautiful red colour when you bought it in the shop.
Dave, if you're planning to go out in the garden over the next couple of weeks or the allotment, what can you be getting on with?
Good question, Daniel. Weather permitting, and it's a very big if at this particular moment, is it? I've got my back to the outside, so I don't know what it's like outside at this particular moment. But indeed, you know, this is the time when you can take stock of an allotment or a garden generally, and see the shape of it. Just take stock generally, look at the shape of the garden. It's very much a time for repair and mending things, mending fences, for clearing away any rubbish that may have escaped your notice. And there's always, sometimes you wonder where the rubbish has actually come from. Did I really put that lot there, you know? Clearing away the rubbish that may have escaped your notice or has been hidden, for instance, under fully blooming plants. If you have a greenhouse, cleaning up and wiping down the glass, repairing any of the broken panels. Because if you remember back to an earlier question we were asking, that's where you want to put some of your more tender plants anyway, so it's well worth checking the greenhouse to see that the temperature will stay above freezing, albeit whether it's heated or unheated greenhouse. There's also still time for pruning established bushes and trees while they're in this dormant stage. Get rid of any of the broken or diseased branches as well as the spindly stems and those that are crossing or growing inwards. There's nothing worse than two branches which are constantly rubbing against each other, because that's a great way for disease and pests to actually get in. So if you can clear away the crossing branches or the inward growing branches, it will help. That'll help to get in more light to the centre of the plant, and it allows air to circulate more freely as well. So it's of course particularly true of fruit trees, where you want an umbrella type of shape rather than an inward growing cross branching tree or bush. If you've either or both, if you're growing in your garden either or both a grapevine or a climbing rose, you can prune them now as well. And leave the winter flowering climbers like jasmine until they've flowered, which they will do over the winter. It's one of the few plants, of course, that you still got which will show other than green or bare branch. Right. So leave those until the early spring. Equally, you can cut back and pull off where necessary those climbers that love to attach themselves to your house, possibly damaging the brickwork or getting into your guttering, things like ivy. Need to check that kind of thing as well. Ivy is rampant. It's rampant in my garden. I'm forever pulling it off things or off places where I don't actually want it to grow. And turn your back and it's back with you, thinking, hello, I'm still here, immediately afterwards. But